Red button, red button. Here comes the intro.
Hey Gearheads, and welcome to Garage Talk, a discussion about all things automotive. I'm Corey.
And I'm Matt. And each week this podcast will serve as a catalyst for discussion on all sorts of topics that grind our gears, rev our engines, or just need a bit more conversation.
And conversation we have, dadgummit.
Oh, goodness, it was incredible.
So much so that I do believe we've got a first, really, that we've had to divide an interview into 2 episodes. So for the next 2 weeks, you will get to hear our conversation with none other than Bryant Blakemore, who himself is quite a busy man. He's got his hands in a lot of stuff, hence 2 episodes worth of material just in conversation with him. I mean, he's gone and done everything from the Baja race, which was like a dream of his.
Oh, yeah.
From the age of 7, he said.
Top of his bucket list.
Yeah, the top of his bucket list. So where does he go now? He's got his own racing association. There's just so much going on, not only in this episode, but in his life.
Yeah.
And just an incredible story. And we've only scratched the surface of what he's into, what he's doing, what he has done. And I told him that we are keeping the lines of communication open because there will have to be more episodes to come.
Most definitely.
He's doing things that would be very fun to partake.
Oh, absolutely.
In.
Yeah. I've already sold my soul with the Impreza, I think, at this point. So,
well, that's between you and the powers that be on that one, Matt. But we welcome Bryant Blakemore with us. He has his hands in a lot of things, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, there's a lot of pies. Of pies over here.
I'll say this just first off. I really like your tagline on your personal Facebook page. First generation hot rodder and off-road racer, designer, builder, promoter, driver. And then I start digging around in all your businesses, turning little boys' dreams into grown men's realities. I like that. Why don't you tell our wonderful audience just a little bit of all the things that you are into and kind of give us a sneak peek of kind of who you are as an auto enthusiast?
Sure. So I am literally a lifelong gearhead. When I was a child, I would draw cars. I could identify every car on the road driving by headlights or taillights from miles away. And my deal saying first generation, my family is not really into cars. I'm not sure where I acquired this, except that my grandmother would not buy a car unless it came with the biggest optioned engine possible from the factory.
Nice.
She actually bought a 1986 Lincoln Mark 7 that had the 5-liter Cobra motor in it, and bought that to bring me home from the hospital when I was born. So awesome. I blame her. I blame her for that. I also blame her for some of my fashion sense. She was kind of a flashy woman, and I tend to lean that same direction on occasion. So, but other than that, I didn't grow up in a hot rod house. I didn't grow up in a car house. Our cars went to mechanics, and they weren't fixed in the driveway until I started fixing or attempting to fix things. But my entire life has revolved around automobiles in some way or another. I dig them, and that's been my jam my whole life.
Yeah.
And so it's led me to pursue opportunities in some very interesting things, and I'm very thankful for those opportunities that I've had and things that have presented from other opportunities. It seems to be compounding, and fortunately, in these last couple of years, it's been compounding rapidly in a very interesting direction, and I really like that. I like being able to do that and do these things and provide hopefully some excitement to other people. The deal about saying turning little boys' dreams into grown men's realities. Well, I know that it's relatable to others. When I would go on road trips with my family, I would see awesome pickup trucks and awesome cars rolling down the highway. And I thought, oh, that's so cool. One of these days I'm going to have one of those. And now I have the opportunity to have those or to build those for people on occasion. I don't do that full time, but every now and then I'll take on a special project for somebody if they understand my timeline for it. But
Right.
that's the deal. You know, these are built for kids to enjoy and men to want to have. You know, or women. You know, it doesn't really matter. But I like being able to bring these types of vehicles and you know, content out to people that were like me as a child, and
Right.
it hopefully gives them good dreams for their futures and to do that. And I've kind of done that my whole life with this type of stuff.
So, kind of following format of some previous interviews we've done, kind of walk us through maybe some notable vehicles in your past. I know you say you didn't grow up in a gear-headed household, nor did I per se.
Right.
My brother was the inspiration there. But what are some notable vehicles that you've had or currently have, wink wink, in your life that kind of helped shape who you are?
I don't know if we have enough time to go through everything that I've owned.
Hit the highlights.
Of course, starting off as a child, the '86 Lincoln that I came home from the hospital in when I was born. After my grandmother passed away, we kept that car for quite a while. Unfortunately, I was broke and in college and couldn't maintain it properly. I couldn't afford to keep it nice. We ended up selling that car, and it had almost 300,000 miles on it, on the original engine and the original transmission. Wow. And this is in a two-door sports coupe.
Yeah.
You know, that's pretty impressive. It got driven all the time. My first vehicle that was mine, that I bought, was a 1977 Chevy pickup, two-wheel drive with a cammed out 305. That vehicle was my first instruction on how to maintain, repair, and upgrade cars. Yeah. When I bought that, I bought a Chilton's manual, and I had a very small metal toolbox full of hand tools, and I swapped a transmission. I swapped an engine in it. I cut through a fuel line with a hacksaw once and patched it with JB Weld. I blew the second engine, blew both engines in it, driving to school, trying to get to school. I would work on it till 3 o'clock in the morning, trying to get it together so that I could drive it to school the next day. You know, it had road signs riveted to the floor so I didn't fall out through the rust. I got it stuck in the mud. You know, I did all the things that teenagers do with their first vehicle.
Please tell me you still have that one.
No, I don't. I don't know that I would want to still have that one. It was pretty rough. My mom caught me doing donuts at the stock show one year and got pretty mad and whatnot. It did end up in my hometown. There, one of the mechanics in my hometown bought it and chopped the frame and turned it into a short bed and lowered it and put an engine out of an El Camino in it, and it did all kinds of crazy custom work, body work, painted it. It's like it was brown with a black fender, and now I think it's teal or something like that. And, you know, it's like a lot of the old square body Chevys, when they do convert them to short beds, he put a 90s model step side bed on it and whatnot. I mean, it's way custom. It may not be the way that I would have done it, but I'm glad that someone else got some enjoyment out of it. I'd love the hell out of that thing, but it taught me a lot, and it didn't create any discouragement for me to continue with cars. Every hardship that I had with it was something that told me, you know, hey, keep going, because yes, you don't like working at 3 o'clock in the morning trying to put an engine in that you've never done before, and it's frustrating. But when you get it done, you think, oh, you know, what else can I do? If I can do that, I should be able to do something else. And, you know, so I really appreciated that truck. Yeah. Afterwards, after that vehicle was my first diesel, which led me down a very interesting path in life for about 12 years of all diesel stuff. And that was a 95 Ram 2500, the quad cab, the extended cab, long bed, 4-wheel drive, automatic. I got that right before I went to college for my sophomore year, which I went to college at the University of Wyoming. It was 2,000 miles away from where I'm from. Yeah. And it was, you know, so I my first year there, I didn't have a car, and it killed me. It was killing me not to have my own car. And so I bought this truck, and it was cherry, fresh paint. It had been owned by an older gentleman that used it to pull a fifth wheel every now and then. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, for some unknown reason, literally, I'm not trying to cover up any kind of story, but I blacked out while I was driving it, and I totaled it 4 weeks after I bought it.
Oh, man.
Hadn't even made the first payment on it. The only positive from that is that the insurance paid me more than what I paid for it. So that was probably the first and last vehicle I've ever turned a profit on when I and but that truck there did a couple things for me. One, it introduced me to diesel and what that was capable of, and I fell in love with it. And it introduced me to the Cummins engine, which is, in my opinion, a mechanically injected 12-valve P-pump Cummins is my absolute favorite engine of all time for anything. It doesn't really matter. That's my favorite engine, especially in diesels, especially in the Cummins lineup. And since then, I've owned almost every one that you can own except for the 24-valve Cummins. I don't appreciate a injection pump that can't pull its own fuel if the lift pump dies. And for that reason alone, I won't ever own one because I go a lot of remote places. And if I have a problem, I need to know that I can at least limp my vehicle out to get me somewhere where I can fix it. And the 24-valve just doesn't invoke that confidence in me. Let's see. So diesels I own, like I said, I've owned a first-gen Dodge, a second-gen Dodge, two third-gen Dodges,
I'm
two second-gen Dodges.
sensing a trend here.
Yep.
Brand bias.
And a fourth gen Dodge. I don't like to say that I'm a committed to one brand, but I like them. I like the Rams now. I like the Dodges then. I think they've got great body lines. I think it's a good looking truck. And you just can't beat a straight six Cummins turbo diesel. It's really, in my opinion, the best diesel motor out there available in any truck and in any form. I've owned another interesting vehicle that I had. I had a 2006 or 7 Jeep Grand Cherokee 2-wheel drive with the Mercedes diesel in it.
Right.
I'm sorry.
That's yeah. Don't be. I loved it. It was an amazing little machine. The biggest difficulty with that vehicle was finding people that knew anything about it, and it's not rare in the sense that it's valuable, but it's rare. It's extremely rare. They only made it for 2-year models. That Jeep itself, the body and interior and all that was kind of cheap. It wasn't great, but that drivetrain was amazing. It had the 5-speed automatic, and at that time in the Chrysler Mopar world, that transmission was also shared in all of the AMG Mercedes cars, all of the SRT cars. Anything that had a 5-speed automatic had that transmission, and it was bulletproof. That little thing got 23 miles per gallon, sounded cool. People always ask, "What is that? Are you putting the right fuel in that thing?" Oh yeah, I know. I even got a custom vanity plate that said it's diesel, and so that people would know, hey, that's a diesel Jeep. So that was a pretty cool vehicle that I had for a while. I sold it, and the people that I sold it to drove it all the way up to Montana or something like that on vacation after I sold it, and so I wish I hadn't sold that one. Maybe I should have kept it.
That's the second of those diesel-powered Jeeps that I know of or that have ever heard of or anything. The other one was a friend of mine looked at buying one at one point and didn't end up doing it. But that's the only two that I've ever heard of.
Oh, yeah. They're extremely rare. They're extremely rare, and it's not the same. It's not the same engine as the Liberty diesel.
Okay.
And it's not the same engine as the 3-liter that's in the newer Jeeps. In fact, both of those engines, I believe, were Fiat engines. Even the one in the Liberty. This is a Mercedes diesel, and it's the same engine that they put in the Sprinter vans and all of the E-Series Blue Tech cars and all that. It was the same engine. The concerns I had with ownership on it, I put a lot of miles on it, and it was getting to the point where I knew things might start breaking down. And because it's a Mercedes diesel, I was a little concerned about that. So I decided to go ahead and offload it. But apparently it's good forever, and I should have kept it. It was a common rail injected motor. Of course, I had big dreams to turn it into an SRT8 Jeep killer and, twin turbos and all kinds of crazy stuff that doesn't exist for that motor, and it would have been ungodly expensive and probably not a good idea. So I'm glad that before I got too deep into that one, I unloaded that.
Yeah.
So moving on from there, I've owned a lot of different vehicles, 99% trucks. Until this last year, I've never owned a car myself. It was mine. I've owned a few SUVs. I had a long travel Bronco that was a nightmare for about 6 months, and I lost any profit I've made on any vehicle. I lost it all selling that Bronco. That was not a good experience for me. Unfortunately, it was a really cool truck, but didn't work out. I had a friend approach me to buy one of his trucks, and he sold it to me for a good price, and it was a 2003 Ram 2500 two-wheel drive Cummins that made about 1,200 horsepower. And it was fully built from front to back. Literally everything had been gone through. The suspension, the rear axle had a locker in it. It had a two-stage nitrous setup on it. It had compound turbos, injectors, cam, headwork, you name it. It was on it. And it was built and done when I bought it, which was amazing to buy one and not have to put anything into it. It had a Viper, the SRT Viper truck body kit on it. Well, the front valence and the hood were all factory steel OEM from the SRT10 truck on it. It was a quad cab short bed on 24-inch wheels. I bought that with the intention to resell it, but I had a little fun with it while I owned it. I went to a dyno day here in Lubbock for a bunch of street cars. It was put on by 1320 Video and the Mexico Racing League guys, and I parked it out back, and everyone had to look at it when they drove in to get on the dyno and wondering why there was this tractor sitting out behind the shop. I asked the guys, I said, have you ever dynoed one of these, a high horsepower diesel before at this place? And they said, no. I said, okay, well, this truck smokes pretty heavily just because of the turbo setup on it and the amount of fuel that it was pushing. I said, do you mind if I just go last at the end of the day of that dyno day? Let everybody go. That way I don't smoke out the shop and cause a problem or whatever. Okay, that's fine. So everybody went. Cars were going all day. There were Corvettes and CTSVs and Mustangs and GTOs and all kinds of stuff showing up at this dyno day. And everything was heavily modified and coming from all over Texas and New Mexico. And these guys a lot of them were all street racers and things like that. I'm not really into that scene that much. I'll play around on the highway a little bit if someone wants to get a little froggy, but other than that, I don't go looking for it. I don't need the trouble that can come from that. But I went to this dyno day and pulled my truck up on the rollers, and I asked them again if they had ever done anything that was as heavily modified as this truck, and they said no. And so they let me drive my truck. I was the only person to do that. I'm sure a lot of people were asking questions at that point. Pop the hood, and it's all chrome and powder coat and everything, and there's two turbos sticking out there, a 62 millimeter that was feeding an 88 millimeter, and both of them were high polished and chromed and whatnot. And
my goodness.
So we get it going, and on that dyno, you have to apply braking to it to create load. Well, they were dynoing street cars all day, 2,000 pound, 3,000 pound street cars, and I pull up in an 8,000 pound truck, work truck, and I joke, I say call it a tractor or a work truck. It was an extremely nice truck, fresh paint, everything was just super clean on it, but it's a smoky old diesel, whatever. So I asked the guys to load the dyno heavy, and they loaded it to the equivalent of about 12,000 pounds and of road force of it, as if I weighed about 12,000
Right.
pounds. And I get it to spin up and finally get it to light, and I spin the rollers and it shoots off a number. And they asked me, I said, do you want to go again? Do you want to dyno it a second time? And I said, well, what did it make? And they said 818 horsepower and 1,450 foot-pounds of torque. And I said, well, does that win the dyno day? And they're like, yep. And I said, nope, unstrap it. I'm going home. Where's my trophy? And those numbers were on an old tune. The tuning had gotten much better from the last time that truck had been tuned. So it was running an old tune, and it was without nitrous. That was fuel only. I didn't even have any nitrous in the bottle. And one of the guys I met a couple days later that was right behind me had a twin turbo Mustang, and he dynoed like 765 or something like that. And he said, man, I could have turned it up. I said, well, were you spraying? And he said, yeah. And I said, man, I hadn't even filled the bottle. We could go all day, buddy. So that truck was fun. I played with a few people on the highway, and then I ended up selling that and turning a small profit on it, not enough to, counteract anything I had done in my previous endeavors. I sold it to a guy that builds 1,000 horsepower Toyota Supras in Florida, out by Miami. And so he took it, upgraded the injectors, retuned it. He ended up pulling the transmission out. And one problem I had with that truck was that around town, it was kind of laggy, a lot of fuel, big turbos, and it wouldn't light them off very well until you got to a pretty good roll. Now, from a 70 punch, it would smoke both back tires off of it going down the highway. But around town, it was a bit of a dog. So in a street race, unless it was from a roll, it wouldn't have been a good contender anyway, unless you needed a smoke screen to prevent anybody from seeing what was going on. But when he got that truck, he drove it around and messed with it some, and then he pulled the transmission out to get it refreshed and found that the lockup on the stall speed on the torque converter was near stock and that needed to be changed. So he changed it and put it all back in, and now he races Lamborghinis pulling a horse trailer behind it. So it's become a much bigger monster than whenever it was.
That would be a sight to see.
No kidding.
Oh, it's crazy, and I believe him 100%. He's all about those inline sixes out of his 2JZs and everything else that he builds out there. So that was a pretty notable vehicle in my past. I didn't have it a real long time, but it was a lot of fun. I think I showed a lot of people what diesels were capable of with that truck. I built a show truck around that same time, a little before I started building a show truck. It was a 2007 Ram 2500 Cummins turbo diesel. I've owned a few of those.
One or two.
It was two-wheel drive. I lowered it. I converted it to a dually. I put Cadillac taillights in it. I did a custom interior and color matched a bunch of stuff. And I didn't get any magazine features in it. At that time, I was kind of chasing that magazine cover SEMA type crowd until I learned better about all that. And, so I was hitting the car show circuit pretty heavy, a lot of small local stuff, which is what I had time to do and go see. And I just put that truck out there as much as I could. I was trying to learn social media at that time. And this was 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago. So it wasn't as prevalent as it is now, but it gave me an opportunity to write some reviews for some parts and work with some manufacturers on some things. I worked with Valair clutch because I ended up converting that truck from an automatic to a manual. And I put a prototype clutch from Valair in it, and I put the full lineup from S&B at the time on the truck. They approached me because I was real heavy in the forums at that time. Not quite as much Facebook and definitely not Instagram back then, but there was a lot of effort put into the online forums, which have kind of changed. Nowadays, it seems not as many people use them, and the environment is not quite the same. Did a lot of write-ups and things like that. So that truck taught me how to interact with people and kind of learn what partners or sponsors I prefer partners because you should work together
Right.
in doing things like that. But that truck allowed me to start to learn what those people would be interested in and what they're looking for when interacting with people to give product to. Some of the stuff I paid for, and some of it they just shipped straight to my house, no questions asked. And I thought that was pretty impressive. Me, I'm a nobody. I'm just some kid from South Texas that is obsessed with cars and doesn't have any other hobbies. And fortunately, I had a good job and I could afford to play with my cars and whatnot. And, and it was interesting to learn those things about that.
Yeah.
So that gets us to about 2015 as far as interesting cars go. There's probably 12 more from start to now that could be in there, but those are the most notable ones that impacted me.
Yeah.
And then we come to the biggest one. So I'm going to tell you that story by starting another story, going back to when I was 7 years old. So when I was a kid growing up in South Texas, again, I wasn't in a car family. Car culture was singular only to me. My car culture was in my head. I wasn't hanging out at car shows. I wasn't doing that kind of thing. I didn't have other, family members that owned a mechanic shop, my uncle or whatever. I didn't have any of that. It was all me seeking it out. Well, turns out that I had a family friend. What my parents had a family friend. We went over to their house one day and he sat me down on the couch. He was from Mexico and he pulls out a photo album, not Instagram. It wasn't on his phone. It was actual photos, from the 70s, I think it was 70s, early 80s. And I was about 7 years old. And this guy was involved in Mexico, Formula One, NASCAR, other circle track racing, things like that. And he was showing me all these pictures of auto racing in Mexico City and in Monterrey and in other places around Mexico. And then he gets to a bunch of pictures with cars on all terrains and mud tires and dust everywhere. And it's Baja.
Yeah.
And I had never heard of that before. I had zero influence from Baja before that point in my life. And as a child, you often go through a lot of stages. I'm going to be a mechanic. I'm going to be a firefighter or a policeman or an astronaut. And that changes. 3 years later, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to do this. Well, Baja had been ingrained in the back of my brain from that day, that minute until now. I mean, it will never leave me. I am stuck with Baja. And I just didn't know anything about it. And back then we didn't have the internet like we do now to research it and whatnot. So it just lived in the back of my mind. Baja Beetles and old Chevy and Dodge and Ford pickup trucks that were just out in the middle of the desert. And I thought that's amazing. Whatever that is, I don't even know what that is. Whatever that is, I'm going to do that. And from that point on, the top of my bucket list was to race in Baja for a 1,000-mile race in my own vehicle. That was my goal, life goal. Well, 2015 comes around. I sell my street truck, and I've got a couple friends that I know have the means and the interest to go to Baja. And I'd been, of course, by then, all through college and whatnot, I'd been researching it and looking at YouTube and looking at on TV. It would come on every now and then, cable or whatever, whenever I had access to that. And so I'd become a little more familiar with the sport, but I didn't have any direct contact with it. When I sold my street truck, that 1,000 horsepower Dodge, I called my buddies. I said, hey, I've got some cash. Do you want to go to Baja and race? Do you want to go down there and do this? And if we're going to do it, let's do it, and let's do it right. And they said yes. And I said, okay, good, because I can't afford to do it by myself, so I got to have you with me. So I was really glad that they jumped in on that. So we sat down and we gave ourselves some guidelines. And this is something that I've carried through all of my race program and everything like that, is that you have to have a plan, and you don't always have to stick to that plan, but you've got to try to consider all the variables in your preparation. And if you don't prepare properly, in Baja, you could literally die.
Mm.
And so it's important, and we, we worked through how we wanted to do that. And we had three main requirements for the vehicle that we wanted. Well, I guess four. We wanted a vehicle that was already legal to race in Mexico. We didn't want to build one from scratch. We couldn't afford it, and we didn't have time, and that's just not a good idea. So that advice is something I share with absolutely everyone I can that's looking to get into motorsport, any motorsport. Buy a car that's already done, or that needs a few things, but the big things are done. Otherwise, you'll never finish, and it will cost you 4 times as much as you think it will, and all you're going to do is sit in the garage and cry as your wife yells at you for having this thing in there. So buy a vehicle that's already done. So we wanted a vehicle that was already legal to race, which means it had a fuel cell, and it had belts, and it had window nets, and the cage had already been inspected and approved and all of that. So that we wanted a pickup truck. We are from Texas. We like pickup trucks. We want a pickup truck. It's got to be a V8. I don't want anything else except a rumbling V8 in my desert truck. Now, some of you might be saying at this point, Bryant, you love Cummins turbo diesels. Why don't you want a diesel? I'll tell you. Silt and jumping are things that are not good for forced induction, heavy turbo diesel vehicles. Would I love to have a Cummins powered off-road truck? Absolutely. I think it would be amazing. It would get incredible fuel mileage. It'd be awesome. But I have to sometimes, speak to reality a little bit. And I had already jumped a Cummins powered off-road truck and broke motor mounts and put the motor into the radiator and all kinds of stuff. I didn't want to deal with that again. And I knew that a naturally aspirated V8 can chew up a little bit of dirt should you have a leak in your intake system. A turbo vehicle won't. You put any dirt in there and it starts to grenade everything, and it goes downhill from there. So we wanted a V8 gas, a pickup truck, and we wanted one that was already built. And then we got down to the money. Well, how much are we going to spend on this? And so we put a price tag of $20,000 on our truck. Between the three of us, we could split it. That seemed reasonable to everybody at the time. And so we went shopping. We started shopping. We got on Race Desert, and we got on Facebook, and we started, going anywhere and everywhere looking for vehicles and posting on the forums. And a lot of people said, oh, you'll never find that combination of things. You'll never find it for that price. You just won't do it. I said, well, I have immense patience when it comes to finding that vehicle. I will find it. Just wait. I will wait until I have the right deal. And so also that year, again, we're in 2015, I had found out that there was desert racing in Texas. And I had found some people that did that, participated in it. So I started reaching out to people saying, hey, can I come see what this, how do I get involved in this and whatnot? And I found a guy down in Midland that raced a Class 7 truck, V6 Ford Ranger, essentially unlimited suspension, had a frame, but was not a door slammer. It was a fiberglass body on everything, but still had to carry the frame, and it had the engine has to be the same manufacturer as the body of the vehicle, so Ford. I met up with him, and we went to a local off-road park, and he took me for a ride in that truck, and that was my first time to be in an off-road vehicle like that, and it was exactly as I had imagined, and the coolest thing I've ever done at that point in my life. And so I helped him start pitting at the local races and whatnot, and that there were more of these trucks. And there were trophy trucks with 800 horsepower and 3 feet of suspension. And all of this stuff was literally in my backyard. And I thought, man, I am on my way to my dream. I've got to stay with this and figure it out and keep going. Well, that guy invited me to lunch one day, sat me down at a Mexican restaurant in Midland and said, hey, I know you've got a lot of enthusiasm for the sport. Do you want to start a race association with me? And I said, wait, what? We're going to do this? And he was like, yeah, 50-50. I want to put on desert races in Texas more than what is already happening. And I said, absolutely. I will absolutely do that. And so that's how my off-road association, Tora, Tejas Off-Road Racing Association, was born. And so that year I was searching for my own truck, and I was starting a desert racing association of my own. I had made a trip out to Nevada by myself for my birthday to go watch an off-road race and see it from where it originated in the West Coast and see how it happened out there. And it was the coolest thing I'd ever done until that point in my life, you know, and all these things just kept going and going and going. And every situation that happened reminded me that I am moving in a direction that is essentially my calling. I am supposed to be involved in this sport with the way all these things went. So as we're shopping for our truck, I get a text from one of my partners in the race truck, and he said, if you had seen this truck, I know you would have mentioned it. I don't think you've seen this one, but what do you think about this one? It's a little bit out of budget, but what do you think? And he sent me a link to a Race Desert ad. And guess what it was? Oh, it was a Dodge, and it was a 3/4 ton, 4-wheel drive, crew cab. It was an '03 Hemi, had already raced in Baja, was score legal, and they were asking 25 grand for it. I thought, well, shoot, that checks off almost everything. An extra 5 grand, I can probably negotiate that down some. I think we can make this work. And that's a vehicle that all three of my partners, or my two partners and I in the race program, had all owned some variant of that truck. So we were extremely familiar with it. I hand the phone to my race association partner because he sent it to me while we were coming back from scouting a race location. And he looked at it. He said, hey, you know, this price is Canadian, right? This truck is in Canada. And I said, what are you talking about? What's that? What is that in U.S. dollars, you know, and not maple syrup or whatever you use, you know? And so we converted it real quick, $19,000. I said, you've got to be kidding me. Is there a phone number on that? I'm going to call this guy right now. I don't even know what time it is there, but we're calling him right now. I called the guy. I said, hey, man, I see your Dodge for sale. Tell me about it. You know, what's the deal and whatnot. And he said, well, you know, we built it with Carly suspension back in 2006, and we raced it 3 or 4 times at the 1000. We had some issues every now and then, but for the most part, it's a well-built truck. Everything's been sorted out on it. All the problems that we had, we fixed, and it's been sitting in my shop up here in Calgary for about 6 years. We're not going to go back, unfortunately. We want to, but it's just not in the cards for my team. So I'm selling the truck. And I said, okay, well, I've imported race cars into the United States before. That's a whole nother story on what I did with that one. If we have time, we can go back and get to that one too. But so I told the guy, I said, look, I want your truck. Do I need a deposit? It's going to take me some time to do all the paperwork because it is in Canada and I'm in Texas. It's going to take me forever to get there and go pick it up. And all that, but I want it. I want your truck. And he asked me one question. He said, well, what are you going to do with it? I said, I'm going to go race in Baja, 1,000-mile race in Baja with it. And he said, nope, truck's yours. Do you need a deposit? Nope, it's yours. Come get it. Tell me when you're ready. It's yours. Nice. And so it took that, you know, Dodge pickup, V8, Hemi. It was everything. Under budget. It was everything. It was just in Canada. And so
minor details.
Minor details, right? You know, that's we can fix that. So fortunately, in the past, like I mentioned, I had imported a race car into the United States for competition back in 2012 or 2013. There's actually a story in Diesel Power magazine written about that whole ordeal. It was the fastest diesel truck in Thailand, and I brought them to the NHRDA World Finals in Ennis, Texas, to put on some. We ended up putting on exhibition runs, and that was another wild experience in this list of things that I've had the opportunity to do. And it was just a harebrained idea. Real quick on that, I saw a picture on the internet of this smoke belching, turboed, tubbed mini truck on a drag strip with a guy in flip-flops next to it and writing on the walls that I had no idea what language it was in some tropical place. And I thought, what is this? And I posted the picture on the internet, and I found the watermark on it, and I found some pages that were involved in that. I firmly believe that social media, when used correctly, is an incredible tool for networking.
Yep.
And those guys told me I found an Australian car page, and they knew what it was, and they knew the photographer, and they said, "Oh, that's Thailand. You know, they race those diesels over there all the time." I said, "What are you talking about?" And I looked it up, Thailand diesel drag racing. If you're ever bored, Google it. They race everything from riverboats to rideable moto tillers. They race all of it. I'm not even kidding.
If it's got a
motor.
They
put turbos, and they put turbos and titanium exhaust and nitrous and all that.
That's so awesome.
Through a few things, I found the fastest truck in the entire country, and I found the representative for them that spoke some English that we could communicate, and I ended up basically coordinating that entire project. It took me a year, but we figured out how to get them to build a chassis appropriate vehicle and then ship it to the United States and then come compete here in the US. And it was amazing. And that compounded some interest in me to do these off the wall things. If I ever have an idea, I just go for it, whatever it takes. So we can circle back to that one, but we'll get back to the desert racing stuff. So because of that, I knew exactly who to call at the EPA. I knew exactly who to call at the National Highway Traffic and Safety people. And these are all people that you have to get permission from to bring a vehicle into the United States. And it is tedious. It's not difficult. It's just extremely time consuming. They want to know everything about it. They want to know where the vehicle came from. What are you going to use it for? When are you going to get it? When are you going to bring it? Are you planning on sending it back to the country it came from? Oh, you're going to keep this permanently. Well, that's a whole different deal. Are you ever planning on putting it on the street? Because you can't do that. Does it have this? Does it have that? Send me pictures. Send me information. I ended up writing a 30-page paper with pictures on this truck and sending it to the EPA just to have them send me a letter back saying, okay, that's fine. And same thing with the National Highway Traffic and Safety. Same thing. They want to feel comfortable that I'm not going to drive the vehicle on the street, that I am, if I'm sending it back, it is going back, and that, I'm going to follow all the proper rules. And personally, I know it's all money. It's based on money. That they don't care that it's a Skyline from Japan or a Land Rover that's not supposed to be here. Whatever, it's money. Is it public safety? Maybe a little bit, but it's mostly money. So I knew how to do that. It took me 3 months to get all that sorted out. So we got all that sorted out. We've got the money together. I've got my ride up to Canada figured out and the trailer and everything. And we go during Thanksgiving 2015. And we get to the border and cross and go up to Canada, and it's like minus 15 degrees or something like that. Fortunately, my time spent in Wyoming had prepared me for such horrible weather conditions.
Yeah, boy from South Texas, is it?
Up there. It's terrible. I'm from the beach, man. It's not supposed to be negative. That numbers get bigger, and that means it's colder. I don't know about that. So we get up there. There's snow and ice on the ground, and we pull into this guy's neighborhood, and there's the truck, and it's idling, ready to go. And I had already bought some race gear for jumping in other people's vehicles and going to Baja with some invitations and things like that. And so I jumped in this race truck and I test drove it minus 15. I didn't have a chin skirt on my helmet, so my chin was freezing, and I'm in a Carhartt and gloves, and this is the best day of my life. And so up until that point, that was the coolest thing I had ever done. And we go back to the guy's house, and we talk about the truck some more and learn about. what he did with it, and kind of the quirks that it has, if any, and what we need to know, and this and that. And I get him to knock another $500 off the price, and we pick it up for $18,500, a fully ready to go turnkey race car that's tagged to race score in Baja, and so it'll race anywhere legally. And we load it up and we start trucking our way back to Texas. And it's funny because even though it was so cold up there, the worst weather we ran into was around Amarillo when the trailer started sliding off the highway and everything, because everything was covered in ice, 40, 50 miles from the house. But we make it back. We start prepping the truck. We make plans on how we were going to handle what we were going to do. The goal was go to Baja and race in Baja. None of us knew what that meant. We didn't know what was involved in that. We had never been. We'd all dreamed about it, or had at least heard about it. So we decided to race in Texas for an entire season, to learn each other, to learn prep, to learn pit process, to learn chase, to learn how to haul all of this equipment around the country. We had a lot to learn. I ended up buying what I have now is my chase truck, a 2013 Ram Cummins 3500 dually 4-wheel drive, and I ended up finding a cheap service bed on it and building a rack and going. I mean, it's legit. It's a legit chase truck. If you Google chase truck, you'll see these images of these awesome support vehicles, and I wanted one, so I built one. And fortunately, I built it for my own race car. Well, how cool is that? So my team races in Texas. 2016 was also the first year that my association put on events. And the way that I operate personally, I do not participate in any event that I'm hosting. If I'm involved in any way of putting on the event, I don't get in a race vehicle. There's too much responsibility for the event to run smoothly for that to happen. So my team they were on their own, and fortunately they did well. Our first year of racing, we raced 8 races in Texas with 2 different associations. We finished 7 of those races, hit green flag to checkered. We ended up taking points championship in my series, my team did, and we took second in points champion in the other series. We had a pretty successful time as a team. Our first race ever, we were educated by the truck a bit on the importance of prep and driving style and things like that. And that's the only race that we've never finished. Was our very first off-road race. And the truck ended up, I don't know if it was in 4-wheel drive or not. Somehow, it must have been in 4-wheel drive is my conclusion. I wasn't in it, obviously. I think what happened was it was in 4-wheel drive and it landed a jump on the throttle and it snapped the U-joints in the front axle shafts, the half shafts, going to the front hubs. And that ruined our day. But that was a part that we didn't prep. We took a gamble. It was 50-50. Change the U-joints or leave them. The truck doesn't have a lot of miles on it. Should be okay. Well, a combination of old parts and driving style, I think, killed those parts, and we learned from that. Okay, we don't leave anything to chance anymore. We go through all the parts every time. We may not replace all the parts every time, but we're going to at least inspect them and see how we feel about them. And we're going to leave the truck in 2-wheel drive until we need 4-wheel drive, and we need to change the way we drive the vehicle, because our goal has to be to finish. If you don't finish, it doesn't matter how awesome your vehicle is or how much money or how much horsepower. It doesn't matter. If you don't make the checkered flag, none of that matters. And so that's the mindset that we developed and that I keep to this day. I'm not an extremely competitive person. I don't have a lot of that in my blood. I wasn't very good at sports when I was a kid. And I just know that things need to be finished. And that is absolutely the truth in off-road racing. And I try to instill that into new racers as well, in that, yes, getting in a trophy truck and making first dust and not having to follow anybody, and winning first place is amazing. But if you don't get there, it does not matter how many laps you led. It doesn't matter how long you were in front. It doesn't matter how fast you were going. You didn't make it to the end. So your goal, and I personally, should always be to finish the race, no matter what it takes. Get to the end of the race as your priority, and the rest will fall in line, especially in off-road racing with, 50, 60% attrition rates. Your competition will make a mistake and break their vehicle, and just put on by them.
Yep.
And these are things that I've learned through my own experience and through as a racer, my hero is Rod Hall in off-road racing. And that's kind of how he ran his team and how he raced his races, was that it's just get to the end. Before you try to win, finish. And I believe that's good advice, and I try to follow that real closely. So our first year in desert racing, we felt comfortable with the vehicle and the us as a team and how we were working and everything like that in our prep. At the end of that season, since I didn't get to race on my own race courses with my association, I took the truck out after our very last race and after the team had won the championship and everything, and I did some victory laps, so to speak. I jumped it a couple times on some of the jumps at the very last race. Well, I will say, and this may be disputed, but I will say that one of my teammates suggested we get the truck a little more airborne than what we had been doing for the last 15 minutes or so. And I said, okay. So the place where I was running the truck was in a canal, and the canal banks were concrete. And I said, okay, well, why don't we go across the canal instead of down it on the man-made jumps? Let's use this. And we scouted it out and said, oh, that's not a bad transition from dirt to concrete. And it's pretty steep. I think that'll be a pretty cool jump. Okay. So I get in the truck and have my helmet on, and I'm strapped in. And I back to the other side of the canal, and I'm like, this truck's pretty heavy. It weighs 9,000 pounds. Literally, I put it on the scales. It's 9,000 pounds. I may need a little more run at this to get enough speed to have a decent jump. So I backed up the other canal bank and onto the top of the other side, and I just hammer down. And I fly off the edge of the canal, hit the bottom of the canal, hit the side of the ramp, and come up in the air. And the only thing I see is sky. And my immediate thoughts were, this was a bad idea. This is not going to end well. And I had a video clip in my mind as soon as that happened. And I've actually spliced that into a video of the jump that you can find on YouTube. And it's the scene in Indiana Jones where he's with his dad and they're trying to escape from the airship. And they get in the biplane, and his dad's like, hey, I didn't know you could fly a plane. And Indiana says, fly, yes. Land, no. And I thought, yep, we're flying, but the landing, we're going to have some problems.
That's it.
And so we come back to Mother Earth, and the truck hits and bounces and rolls. And I rolled it driver's side, roof, passenger side, and I'm stuck up in the air. And I feel as if I have broken my arm, and I know that I just ruined the truck. Right before the next year, we were planning to go to Baja. We only had like 5 months to get everything together, and I thought, this was stupid. I hope someone got a picture of it at least. And so I'm yelling for people, hey, help me! I can't get out of this truck because I'm stuck hanging in the air from my harness. And some people come running over. Fortunately, I had my wits about me enough to at least hold on to my harness and keep my arms from flying around, and to turn the truck off as soon as we stopped. That way I hopefully didn't damage the engine or anything like that. And guys come running over, and one comes to the truck. What do you need? What do you need? I said, well, someone small needs to crawl in through the windshield hole and hold me up while I try to get down and get out. We get out. The ambulance comes. We had just had a race, so there were still people around. The ambulance shows up to come check me out and everything. And I tell them, my arm is not functioning properly. Something is not right. They couldn't diagnose exactly what it was, but we had to figure out what we wanted to do. I was 6 hours from my house, and I had all this race gear to haul back and everything. I'm like, well, I can't do that. And so I end up, while we were there, that community was extremely supportive of what we were doing, despite me trying to ruin it all there at the very end. And the sheriff was our main point of contact for that town, small town in West Texas. And so I call the sheriff and I tell him, I'm like, man, I apologize. Please don't let this reflect poorly upon the association and everything. And he is laughing on the other side of the phone. And I'm like, what? It's not funny. I want to make sure that we're okay. And he said, hey, why didn't you do that on Friday when everyone was here and could have watched it? It's like, oh, well, I guess we're okay. Thanks, whatever. And
I'm fine, by the way.
So, yeah, right. I don't have to have any surgery or anything, but thanks for asking. But no, he was like, man, you idiot, you should have done that when the crowd was here.
Oh,
and
man.
I was trying to get somebody to do that while the crowd was here. You do it afterward. Whatever. So I end up hitching a ride to Midland and walking into the ER with no shirt on and my arm tied up. And that's a 4.5 hour drive from where we were. And I'm on like 2 Advil or something. I'm like, this is not great. And I get to the doctor's office and they asked me what happened. And I said, well, this is when I, started to feel kind of cool. I rolled a race car in El Paso. It's fine. It's fine. And they're like, well, that's an auto accident. I'm like, no. It's a race car. It's a race car. It's not. I wasn't in an auto accident. I jumped a race car and rolled it. And let's be cool here. This is cool. And they put me back in a room and they x-ray it. And they say, okay, well, it's not broken, but it's dislocated my shoulder.
Oh.
Never had that happen before. And some of my buddies had shown up at that point and were in there with me. And one of them had that happen. And I asked him, I said, well, what, how bad is this going to be? And they're like, well, it hurts pretty bad. Anytime I dislocate mine and I have to put it back, I usually black out. I'm like, okay, drugs. Bring on the drugs. I don't do this. And so they hit me with whatever they hit me with, and then they pop it back into place. And I remember coming to, and I was in the middle of a sentence. And those videos where people are coming off anesthesia and they're saying all kinds of wild stuff. I stopped mid-sentence with my brain saying, what have you been talking about this whole time? And my brain said, well, you're talking. Open your eyes, dummy. And I look around and the room is full of people that weren't there. I went under and I was like, oh, great. Look over at my buds and they're laughing and they're like, man, we didn't know any of that about you. And I'm like, that's not funny. That's not funny. And they said, no, it's fine. You have been explaining the importance of race car safety to everyone this entire time.
Oh, good.
The irony being.
So that was the end of our first race season. They rolled the truck back over as I was on my way to the hospital, and it fired right up and drove onto the trailer. No problem. I thought, good. Well, that's good. So we got it back home and pulled it into the shop and looked at it, and I smashed every single body panel on the truck. I smashed body panels that you shouldn't ever smash on a truck. I smashed all of them. So step one, we need a new body. 100%. We can't use any of this. Hood, fenders, doors, B pillars, A pillars, C pillars, roof, all smashed, all of it. So we shop for another truck, and to try to figure out how we're going to do this body swap. And I don't want to spend a lot of money. I need something out of a junkyard. All I need is the cab and the doors and the hood. The fenders are fiberglass. I can get those ordered. Not a big deal. This led to another interesting development during this whole ordeal. But it's actually worked out in our favor. So we find on Facebook Marketplace, I find a 2003 or 2004 white 3/4 ton 2-wheel drive Hemi pickup that doesn't have an engine, doesn't have transmission, it's barely a roller. I thought, cool, I will buy that. And this does two things for us. It gives me a title for the vehicle. So now the Canadian vehicle has been crushed and no longer exists. EPA, everybody, it's not around anymore. This is a titled Texas truck. And we got a clean body out of it. Sweet. And I got a spare rear axle for it. The spares are always good. So cool. So we pull it up to the shop, we buy it, and we swap the bodies over. We cut the old body off. We find that not because of the roll, but previous damage to the vehicle had occurred, and some of the roll cage was loose. So we pulled the entire dash out. We built a custom dash. We welded in some new gussets on some of the tubing in the roll cage. We fixed some of the welds that you couldn't reach with the body on it. Just finished them up. Non-critical components, of course, but we were able to go through the truck a lot deeper than we could have with a body on it. So that was, I take credit for that. You're welcome, team. I made it better this way. And
I'm
so
sure
we
they
get the
saw
body
it the
swap
same way.
and everything. Oh yeah, I'm sure they do too, with all the time and energy and money and everything spent fixing a body rather than prepping the truck for Baja, and all that. But so I send one of the partners to go to the DMV and get a bonded title for the truck. And he's in the waiting room waiting to go through this process. And the sheriff comes out, their local sheriff, and is like, so what are you trying to do here today? He's like, we have this Dodge truck and we're trying to, get a bonded title for it, bought it and didn't get a title and this and that. And he's like, well, we need to have a discussion about that. That truck is stolen, and we're going to have to talk about it. So he calls me. He was like, hey, the sheriff's coming with me to the house to see the truck. They said it's stolen. I said, well, the only thing left on the chassis is the front firewall, the floor, and the back firewall. It looks like a chop shop had it. So this is not good for us. And he said, yeah, I know, but let's just see what they say. So auto theft task force, whatnot, follows my buddy to his house where we were keeping the roller until we could take it to the scrap yard and get rid of everything that we didn't use. And he's like, so what's going on here with this? What is happening here? And he said, okay, well, I don't know if you'll believe me, but we race off-road cars and we rolled it and we needed the body. And so we wanted the title from it and everything. And here's pictures and here's the video of the roll and here's my idiot partner that did it. And here's what we're doing. And here's the new body on the old truck and everything that we did. This is it. It's legit. And we showed him everything. And he was like, okay, well, that's pretty cool. So I think we can work through this. Well, it turns out that whoever owned the truck before it broke down and it got towed to a mechanic shop, and the mechanic put a mechanic's lien on it because the guy ended up getting deployed and not telling anybody and was gone for a year and a half. This truck ended up in a junkyard, and when he came back from his deployment, it was nowhere to be found. So he told his insurance that it got stolen, and it was just a huge insurance fraud case, ridiculous thing. And at the end of the day, the state washed the title, and we have a clean Texas title for this truck now.
Awesome.
And which was good because we needed paperwork like that to be able to go to Mexico and whatnot. And now it's not a problem. It's an awesome Texas pickup truck.
That could have ended very differently.
Oh yeah, especially with the way things were looking, it could have been pretty bad. There's a few other parts to that story that I'm not sure I'm going to say on this program, but are also entertaining and involved in that. But it's just been this interesting process this whole time. But none of it, throughout all of this, none of it has been discouraging to me or my partners at the time to stop what we were doing. And so that was 2016.
All right, so that was part one. We really hate to cut the conversation off, but we could have talked all night.
There's just
Bryant.
too much good stuff to cram into one episode.
Right,
I mean,
and the more he was telling and sharing with us, I was chatting back and forth with Matt on our computers. I was like, I don't want to end it here.
Yeah.
How do we keep going?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Bryant, I don't know if you saw a distracted look on my face, but it was me just making sure that Matt was cool with us still recording and not abruptly cutting you off and going into our outro and just being done with the episode. You were interesting enough that we just had to keep going with you. So
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for that. And Matt, why don't you go on and hit the button, start the music. We'll let the people know. If you want to know more about us at Garage Talk, you can head on over to our website, gtgaragetalk.com. You'll find links to everything that we're into, everything that we are doing, as well as links to this episode, all the things that Bryant is into himself. You will get all that on our website, gtgaragetalk.com, as well as...
And don't forget, this is only part one.
I know.
Be sure to come back next week for the rest of this. It's really, really cool.
So,
really, really good.
If you're listening to this episode and you have not subscribed on your favorite podcasting platform, please help us out. Hit subscribe so
Most
you
definitely.
get every episode as they come out every Friday, and we'll keep producing great content for you. But until next time and next week, bye.